tell me about the electricity. This is the first time we encounter that in the drama. So what were you trying to evoke and what were you looking to build in that first moment where the audience experiences that?
The idea is that the electricity helps us to convey what the external environment is kind of doing to Katherine, what effect it's having on her, but also it helps us to convey her inner kind of emotional life as well, and the either harmony or discord between the two.
People talk about, with kind of autism and stuff like that, people talk about lack of separation between different emotions or knowing how to identify different emotions, which I think can be very, very true. But I think it is just as true and just as disruptive when it comes to sort of different sensory elements. But sometimes it's a sense of, am I feeling that or am I hearing it? Like when these elements kind of combine in different ways, you get some quite interesting effects, and I think that's what we can kind of, and that's what we use to really kind of like maybe evoke that fullness or the overwhelmingness and difficulty sometimes of like neurodiversity and relationship with sound, because often it's not necessarily what you're actually hearing, it's what you perceive to be hearing, or it's the difficulty, certainly for me, the difficulty of separating what I'm actually hearing with what I'm feeling and what my other senses are. It's maybe this kind of lack of separation between different senses.
Should we listen to some of the electricity?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, great. It like almost feels like a cross between electricity and like that feeling you get with like the rumble of a cat purring. It's got like a little bit of that about it. So
it's quite an electric feeling, I would say, actually, a cat purring.
Yeah, that's
I would describe
true.
that as
for you and maybe for other neurodivergent people, explain to me a little bit about why particular sounds can kind of evoke different things.
The electricity is working in harmony with the music here and the sounds of the forest. They're all synthesizing together in a kind of really positive, joyful way. There's no discord there. So I think often you can tell from the tone or feeling of the electricity what kind of relationship Katherine has to that sound.
There's a bit in this scene where Katherine in her narration says the word texture, and then this sort of textural sound, including some of the electricity, builds up. So let's just have a listen to that part.
Not a scent, but a texture. It makes me feel like I can't breathe.
So we get that sort of build, and there's that pause after she talks about the texture. So what did you have to think about in building that up?
In terms of the build there, for me, it's because the electricity comes in for Katherine, who's on the walk, who's talking about walking past the noisy school kids. They're giving off a sense of electricity for her. But it's that idea of then it kind of it builds around that texture because it's creeping into the world of Katherine, who's the narrator, who obviously still experiences electricity as well, but is not in that scene. So it's the idea of the residue of it moving across the two different time zones. That makes any sense. So it's there in the scene because Katherine there would have been responding to it, but it's also it's almost like I think, to be super specific, the sense of her describing the electricity and the word texture is kind of evoking some electricity from her. How did you make it?
With sound design in general, you've got the option of pulling sounds from like sound banks. For this, I sort of mainly made it myself, going from the sort of the really light kind of hum, the kind of hum that you might get from an electricity substation, or you might get from like a noisy light fitting or something like that. Those kind of quite subtle hums. For the more kind of aggressive stuff, like vibrating sort of guitar strings and things like that, I did. I had a sort of a synthesizer, an analog synthesizer, and that just kind of, it always makes noise anyway, even if you're not putting any signal into it. So just sort of like using that and kind of creating some like really kind of like low tones from that are quite kind of jittery, they're unstable. You can layer lots of different sounds, so I can take these sounds that we just heard and then I can layer the more jittery ones on top. I can layer the guitar string. I can layer some other kind of percussive sounds, or maybe some sounds of kind of like my fingers, which I use in some bits. You just kind of record your fingers kind of really, really close, and you you get that very kind of like tactile but slightly sort of like indiscernible sound. You kind of put them all together and then you get this really thick soundscape.
Shall we listen to the whole scene?
Yeah,
Definitely.
that'd be great. Lots of enthusiasm from me there.
Yeah.
And I suddenly became aware of a noise like the crackle of static. I put my phone back in my pocket and listened. All around me, the forest was alive, growing and shifting, drawing up water from the soil and putting on new growth and letting go of its dead. It was so loud, so absolute. If I were ever to believe in a god, I would have found it right there. It was exquisite.
Never skip it. Never skip it. I never do, honestly. I've listened to them so many times and I never, ever skip the music.